Welcome back to Morning Joe. Joining us now, resident fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Institute of Politics, Tiffany Cross. She's author of the new book on sale today entitled Say It Louder: Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy. Tiffany, it's great to see you. Congratulations on the book. As I said, it's out today, and it couldn't come at a better time as we move toward Election Day, especially now in the wake of this movement, in the middle of this movement in the streets of this country since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. How does your book tap into some of those themes, and how will it show itself on Election Day?
Thanks, and great to be back with you, Willie. It's been a while since we've been together. The last time we shared the screen, we were the number 3 trending topic in America. So happy to make my return.
We were? Wow, I'll take number 3. Take the bronze.
Yeah, it was. I was on with you and Nora Rothman, so it was a great segment. So let's try to get number 1 today. I wrote this book long before the George Floyd killing happened, long before Ahmaud Arbery. So it just shows how common and how consistent the oppression of Black lives has been in this country. And so I wanted to write a book that really focused on the power of Black people and Black voters and the media has on our democracy. It casts a wide net of influence. And when you look at the landscape of America, name a war Black people haven't fought in, name a time in this country that Black people haven't influenced, name any part of the culture that Black people have not had a direct impact on. And we've never really been properly acknowledged for that. So even in this moment where there's this cultural shift, right? And a lot of people are celebrating this, and you have these, newly woke corporations coming out. It's still a bit frustrating when we've been an alarm clock for the past, few years, months, decades, and centuries in the country. And the narrative that is often perpetuated in the media, intentionally or not, is still perpetuating a system of white supremacy that positions white people to be in the position of allowing Black people to live, allowing Black people their freedom. This is a space that says we should allow Black NFL players to kneel. White NASCAR owners say we should allow Black drivers to wear Black Lives Matter. And we really want to disrupt that narrative as we're in this cultural shift. That's great, but we need to see a power shift. And so the two things driving that power shift, I think, are definitely the media, but also Black voters. And I think we saw a lot of narratives that were not accurate in 2016. And I see some of those same things happening this go round as it relates to the election cycle. So I'm thrilled to present this body of work. I wrote it very unfiltered. I did not, pull language from the chattering class, but I really wanted it to be something people could consume if you were a political novice or a political connoisseur. And it's a letter or a book that I wrote as a letter to Black people and Black voters. But I want to be clear, this is not specifically for Black readers. Everyone should have intellectual curiosity about the Black experience, our fellow countrymen. So I hope that people receive it with my good intentions and learn from it and get inspired by it.
Well, I suspect they will. We're going to get to number 1 trending this time, Tiffany, but we can't do it without the help of Yamiche Alcindor, who has a question for you. Yamiche?
Well, one, congratulations so much, Tiffany, on the book. It's exciting to see you put out this body of work. Secondly, we see in poll after poll, enthusiasm for Biden does not match as much as negativity against Trump. Rather, that a lot of African-American voters, they're more voting against President Trump, at least right now, than they are for Joe Biden. What lessons do you think Joe Biden should take away from that? And what does it say about African-American voters that they're continually loyal to the Democratic Party, even if they're picking a candidate they're not super enthusiastic about?
Sure. Well, first, I would say the lesson for Joe Biden is we're at a moment where people, previously, I think a lot of Black people saw the possible, and even the possible seemed out of reach. We're at this moment in America now where people are seeing the impossible. So it's not a time to make a safe choice. I think, because so many conversations in the media center white people, that politicians take the lesson from that and think their job is to appeal to these quote unquote swing voters and people in middle America or suburban wise, all the euphemisms we have for white voters. And so I would say to Joe Biden, look, those voters left you a long time ago. The last time the Democratic Party won a majority white vote was in 1965 when the voting electorate was 89% white. The landscape looks different today. And so how do you excite voters, the base, the people who literally resurrected your campaign. And so I would encourage his campaign to focus on that. And in terms of Black voters, yes, we are a pragmatic people, and you've seen the landscape that happened after some people's candidate didn't get to be the Democratic nominee. And there were a lot of people who were upset, and they're like, well, I'm not voting for president, and I'm so disappointed. And it's infuriating, because do you think I, as a Black woman, have ever been excited about a candidate? I was excited to vote for Obama, but how many people have we had to vote for that we weren't excited about? We voted for white supremacists. We voted for the lesser of two evils many times. And so I think it shows that because Black voters have been so historically and consistently brutalized, that we have often been put in the position to make the choice for the person who will do the least harm to our communities.
Tiffany, John Heilman's here with a question for you. John?
Hey, Tiffany, congratulations also from me on the book. Can't wait to read it. I'll just ask you a very specific question, or two really, related, that grow out of the question Yamiche asked. One of which is, given the dynamics in play that the Biden campaign faces, do you think it's absolutely essential that his choice for running mate be an African-American woman, number one? And number two, if he makes that choice, which a lot of people think he's likely to do, I'll bet every dollar I've ever seen that you're going to have a conversation that's going to be engaged by President Trump over the question of reparations. And I'm curious what you think the politics of that discussion would be like in a general election where Joe Biden was running with a Black candidate as his running mate, and where President Trump, given the way he's campaigning right now, seeks to make a political issue out of the question of reparations in the moment we're currently living in.
So I'll take your first question first. As you know, I penned an op-ed for the Washington Post a few weeks ago with my friends and colleagues, Angela Rye, Brittany Packnett, MSNBC contributor, actress Amanda Seales, and others. So I think, yes, but I want to be very clear. It's not so simple that Joe Biden should pick a Black woman, because if you pick a Black woman who is not willing to adapt an agenda that comprehensively addresses issues specific to Black people, then that's not helpful either. So it's not necessarily how Black are you, but how Black are your policies? How focused will you be on this community, and really all communities of color, because there are a lot of spaces that leave room for growth as we're in this moment of time. So I would strongly encourage him to do that. We have to be honest and address the elephant in the room. Joe Biden is just not an exciting candidate. Like Yamiche pointed out, a lot of people are voting against Trump, not necessarily for Joe Biden. And when Black women organize, they don't just organize themselves, they organize community. So how can he help this strong, faithful constituency push him over the finish line come November? And to do that, I do think he needs a Black woman at his side. The question of reparations, I do find interesting. So this is something that I think warrants a lot more intellectual discussion. And I think having a Black running mate would be helpful. The wealth that Black people generated in this country and that we've never really benefited from the cotton industry to the sugarcane industry. And Black people have been, again, historically victimized and brutalized by systems of white supremacy that have perpetuated and rippled through time, rippled through generations. And so there has to be a way, and it can start with Sheila Jackson Lee, her legislation in Congress. She's not even asking for reparations. She's asking for a committee to study the impact of reparations and the fact that she's met with so much resistance. So something else I think this campaign will have to consider is, how does Joe Biden, which, as we've talked about on this show, is somewhat of a moderate, how does he reconcile pushing this forward with an increasingly progressive Congress? We saw Richie Torres and Jamal Bowman when their elections for the Democratic candidacy come November. And so they're going to join folks like the Squad. How does he, when he can be somewhat of a relic sometimes in some of his policies, how does he reconcile and push that legislation forward? And again, I think having a progressive Black woman at his side would be nothing but helpful to him.
The new book is Say It Louder, Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy. Tiffany Cross, congratulations. Great to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.